Welcome to Rewinding Founders, where we talk to founders and entrepreneurs about the very early stages of their journey, openly and honestly, so everyone can see what it's actually like to start something new. Today with us, we have Callie. Callie, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me here, Addie.
Amazing. I'm so happy to have you here. We actually met on the Rocket Booster Accelerator plan. You were saying about how did you get into the accelerator where we met Rocket Booster?
Yeah, so I had a project, kind of some people and collaborators on my team, someone recommended who had seen, us pitch at a different program. Someone recommended that we join Rocket Booster and move forward. And I was talking to that person. I was like, and reading the rules, this is what you need to be. This is your TLR or your TRL that you need to have. You need to be this far in the process before you can apply. And I read all those rules and I was like, that's absolutely not like I am outside of the box that this is appropriate for. Like I am not your target. You want someone who's more evolved. I don't know that I should be applying to this. And the person was like, you know what, just give it a try, see what happens. You don't know. Like you already have the no, go for the yes. Um, that exact experience has happened to me so many times throughout this process of, starting a project and trying to evolve it as far as you can. And so I did. My team we applied. We were very explicit about how we did not fit into their rules and everything. But we were like, but we think we'd really benefit from this experience. Um, and yeah, I mean, they took a chance on us, which was great. I learned a ton throughout that process. I also think that if you're on the earlier side and you're in the same cohort as people who are farther along, you're not just learning things from the classes, you're learning so much from your peers as well, which was very cool. But that experience of, okay, like here's a program, I don't fit into that program, applying to that program anyway, and just being like, please, happens like at least 3 times I can think of that has happened in the context of this project, um, which is awesome. That is definitely just try and be honest. I think is definitely kind of the new operating, whatever for what we're doing. I'm doing it again right now with a different program. So let's see how that goes. I'm in the process of applying for it, and if they think that we're the right fit, great. If not, okay, at least we tried, and we'll try again for the next one. Yeah.
Amazing. There's so many like different programs and really if you only go for the ones that you'll definitely get into, then you're kind of missing the game.
Yeah. Like this whole thing is about taking risks and, trying and asking and hoping and, connections and whatever. And on this, like my day job is I support some programs that are happening at the university that I graduated from in the impact office. And so we're teaching a course on entrepreneurship. I'm not teaching, but I'm coordinating. I'm the behind the scenes person, the person accompanying them. And the amount of times that people just stop because they're like, oh, well, we missed the deadline. Like we missed whatever. It's not even worth trying. Like, absolutely no. You missed a deadline. If you realize you missed that deadline, reach out to that person and be like, I'm so sorry. I missed this deadline. This is when I can get you that information. The amount of times that people will be like, okay, great, do that versus, cutting you off. Um, yeah, I think if you're outside of the rules, that's fine. Just own that you're outside of the rules and try anyway within a reasonable time frame. I think is definitely what I've learned.
This is like such a good point of like I haven't thought about that in so long because I haven't been like in that space, but wow, the amount of times I've tried to get in, like, and most of them I failed. Like most of them you don't, but like sometimes you do, and wow.
Yeah,
Um,
and you won't know until you try.
I'd love to know how did you even get into the space of entrepreneurship?
Ooh, that's a great question. I was not one of the people who's like, I'm just looking for the idea and then I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I was kind of peripherally, kind of in the innovation space. I was working for a contracting, like a um, prototyping and design firm in the US for a while. That kind of, we worked with a lot of entrepreneurs who were developing ideas. I was very much in the physical product space. That was very cool. And then eventually I ended up kind of through Internet of Things type areas. And then I ended up in smart cities. And all the while, there was kind of like this idea and project that had been brewing with the, friends and I had talked about back in the US. And then by the time I got to Portugal and started studying data and how to apply that kind of within various ecosystems and, whatever smart cities is, Then this idea started to really crystallize for me, like this thing that I thought should exist and I didn't understand why it didn't exist. And that's basically mapping the news so that people can like find the information that they're looking for and then use that information in various ways, either people as individuals, who just want to understand what's going on around them, or the newspapers themselves to understand, like, okay, here are trends in coverage across a space, or cities themselves to basically understand, okay, here's what's happening within our city. Here's how we can stay on top of it, and here's how we can take that information and do something else with it. We can make that information more actionable. I didn't understand why that wasn't happening, and so I just started trying to see, okay, if someone wanted to do this, how would they approach it? And then I started approaching and doing those things, and then here we are, several accelerators in, MVP on the way. Yeah, it was a lot of, well, let's just see what the next step is and do that next step, and then here we are.
Amazing. And how did you go from, well, I guess being in that space of more behind the scenes almost to being the entrepreneur and the person who's leading this thing?
Hmm. Um, I think I prefer behind the scenes in general, to be perfectly honest. The only reason yeah, I guess it's just because I want this thing to exist that I'm willing to kind of step into that space and be like, okay, I'll lead this because I think it should exist. That transition has not been smooth. It has not been easy. It's something I struggle with a lot. Like I don't like being the person who's pitching things, and all of that. But at the same time, I'm telling myself constantly that there's a lot of value in it, and like these are great skills to learn. So um, the transition has not been easy. Some days it's easy to get up there and talk to people about this thing that you really love and believe in, and sometimes it is the last thing I want to do. You push through it, I guess. You tell yourself that it's a good thing. I don't have any secret sauce. I don't know, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay, it sounds like you're saying, I believe in this enough to push through the challenges and I would assume also grow really your abilities as a person to get this thing happening.
Yeah, I would say there's so much growth. It's incredible. The skills that I've developed already, which are not like amazing skills at any point, like it's still very much a work in progress, but like if I look back to just a year ago, it feels like wow, I was a different person then. I had like I had much less confidence in myself. I think yeah. I will say this though, about this time last year was the first time I had pitched. It wasn't even, this concept. I was pitching a different idea, in the context of a school program. It was someone else's baby, but I was the person who was pitching it. And I blacked out. I have no idea what happened, because it's something that I find like so terrifying. But at the same time, like just getting through that one experience of preparing and, filming myself all the time and going over it time and time again, just getting through that one experience was like, oh, you've done this. Like, you did it. It was successful. We ended up winning that competition, which was awesome. Like, you did it. You can do it again. And I think just knowing that I had done it before definitely kind of pulls through a lot of confidence and kind of helps you through those moments where you're like, I can't possibly do this. Just having that confidence of knowing that you have done it before really, really helps. Um, yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. What's one thing that surprised you about being an entrepreneur that you didn't expect?
Oh, that's a great question. I didn't realize, and I'm still in the process of realizing this, like this is not a done deal, um, how quickly you can make things happen if you decide to. Um, Actually, let me adjust that a little bit. You're not really in control of time. So sometimes things go a lot quickly, like more quickly than you expect. And sometimes they take a lot longer than you expect, especially if you're trying to talk to customers and understand, what motivates them, what are their, underlying whys. Just having those conversations and getting through them and kind of getting those insights and the nuggets of gold can take a long time. It takes longer if you don't do it. So start doing it right away. But kind of lost my train of thought already. Yeah, it's gonna pop back to me and whatever. But anyway, I guess things take a lot longer than you think. Oh, I recall. Okay. After all of that, sometimes you're waiting for the moment, and you're like, I know, like it will be clear to me when it's time to whatever, when it's time to release this product, when it's time to whatever. Um, there are a lot of moments where I've just been like, I guess I'll do it and see. Like, I thought that there was going to be a moment where it was like, ah, yes, now we have this, and now it's the perfect time to do this step. And there were a few moments where I was like waiting for that to happen, and I realized like there was nothing to wait for. Like it was just me who had to make a call to do that thing, and that I did not expect. I thought that that would be a lot more clear to me. What the next step was as I was going through this process. But many times, you're waiting for something, and it turns out that you're the one that you're waiting for. Like you just have to make a call and be like, it's now. Now is the time, and decide that now is the time. That has
Amazing.
been a very strange experience, realization.
I was just talking to a founder who told me that, like, a very similar experience of when I asked her what surprised her, and it was like, there's no one that can actually give you an answer. Like, you can ask all the professional everything and experts and da da da, and at the end of the day, you're working on your product the longest, and you know the inside, and they know some things about the outside, but the no one can really tell you what to do.
It's so true. It's so true. Like you have a gut feeling, and maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. Also, maybe there are many rights and many wrongs. And the amount also, you'll go to people for advice, people that you really respect. No one's going to give you the same answer, too. So it's not like you're like, okay, I'll just get the consensus of the professionals and I'll act that way. You get conflicting and like exactly opposite information from people constantly. And you just have to decide which one you believe. That's great. Like there are no right answers. You're just doing your best. It's crazy.
It
It's
really, wow.
crazy. Yeah. Did you experience that too? Like,
Yeah, the fact that you just, everyone has, first of all, you need to know who you're going to for advice because different
mhm.
people, I remember when me and my co founder consulted someone about marketing. And the guy was the CMO of, I'm sure he's like a brilliant guy and super intelligent. And he was the CMO of some company that was not doing so well at the time.
Mhm.
And he gave us a very, very pessimistic view of how this is going to look like. Like, this is not going to work. You can't do this. Da, 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 da. And shortly after we found out that like his company isn't doing so great, and then we're like, huh, maybe his view on everything is a bit impacted by his own stage of the journey right now,
Yeah.
because you can talk to different people who are in different places. Even when you talk to two super successful amazing entrepreneurs, and one person had one experience when he was launching and someone had a different experience launching, and they'll give you different advice about launching, and you're like, huh, this is I don't know, like.
What do I do with this information? I
Yeah,
can't do both simultaneously. They're opposite or they're like they don't jive together. How do you do that? It's crazy. And it's yeah. And the people you might really trust and respect them and they've done so well in their field, but still it makes it really difficult to know which information to follow and it's a crazy experience.
it's so interesting. I feel like I don't really want to bring gender into this, but I feel like women also have this even more of a tendency to look for like the approval, and then like you look for someone to tell you that, yeah, this is the right decision to make, but when everyone is giving you like different conflicting ideas, it's, you just have to make the decision. I feel like it strengthened my ability to just say, this is what we're doing. I don't know if it's right or not, but this is what we're going to do. And
Yeah. And sometimes just making the decision is the right call. Like I mean, of course the decision matters, which way you go, but if you're not making a decision, that's usually worse than just deciding and going with whatever kind of feels right. And I have no idea, kind of how gender plays into things. I've never looked at numbers to understand kind of, the tendencies of women entrepreneurs versus not. But I can say that it has helped me to have amongst my mentors someone who I really respect who is a woman entrepreneur. I really do appreciate having that perspective as well. Even if, she sometimes I follow her advice and sometimes I don't, but it is really nice to have someone who is kind of representative of kind of maybe a future version of me in amongst the people who are giving me advice. So that's been nice.
Amazing. Have you seen any difference between the way you see women entrepreneurs and men?
I have not considered it specifically. I don't know if I have a different feeling about one versus the other. I think it's very cool every time I see, women succeed and do things, but I don't know that I've necessarily considered the differences um, so much. Yeah, I'm not sure. That'll be interesting. I'm going to look out for that, kind of moving on and see if I do have some kind of, buried thoughts or feelings about that haven't made themselves clear to me. Yeah, I don't know. Do you?
Cool. I think yes, many. but,
Okay.
but I feel like also it's like you get the cards you get. Different people have different experiences, and the whole game of entrepreneurship is okay, how do I use this thing in order to make my vision a reality?
Hmm.
And okay, some people will not want to invest in me as much because I'm I'm a woman, but some people will want to even more. Like it's
Hmm.
understanding where I can use it to my advantage and where it doesn't really matter, and just like putting yourself in the right headspace of like this is not an issue. Like it's just like it's not a bug, it's a
Ah.
feature.
Yeah, I think it does really depend. And yeah, it's not just gender, right? There are all sorts of other cards that were dealt. And sometimes you realize that they're cards. Like sometimes you realize that there's something that's good or bad, and sometimes you don't necessarily realize until later on, or you never realize that that was a card that someone was using to judge or support you or whatever. Um, but yeah, kind of thinking about how you can use that as a tool definitely seems like a I have not thought about that so much. Maybe I should start. But I like that idea of making it a feature, using it to your advantage and kind of applying, kind of like knowing your audience and understanding, okay, like is this product the right fit for this market, and kind of going from there. And if not, then focusing on other features that, that same market might find valuable.
Do you have co-founders?
Oh, Addie. No.
That's okay.
No, and I can't tell you how much I want, co-founders. And I've tried. I've definitely put, myself out there. Basically used the Tinders of co-founder apps and that kind of thing, and found, met some really amazing people. Um, and at some points I've put myself out there and I've kind of made the invite to join, and some people have been interested and other people it hasn't been the right timing and whatever. It definitely feels like dating sometimes, like it's very much luck and timing and whatever. But though I haven't found um, one or more co-founders who are the right fit for what I need to kind of balance out the skills that I have and the skills that I don't have, where it's the right timing for them and the right value proposition for them, and me simultaneously. I did have a really great conversation with someone where they were like, what are your underlying values? What are like your non-negotiables? And that was amazing. Like just having these conversations with people and like really, kind of getting into the nitty gritty, like, are we going to do this together? Some of those conversations have resulted in really amazing opportunities for learning. One of which is, just defining what your non-negotiables are for you and for the business that you're trying to create. Um, that that is very cool. So no, I'm single and looking for a co-founder. Um, but I've had a lot of really great experiences along the way. But I would say that not having a co-founder is, it simplifies a lot of things because you are the one who's deciding, and, you're making the calls and you don't have to convince someone else, that that's the right idea and kind of get that alignment. But at the same time, kind of goes back to that idea of, when is the right time? Like you're the one responsible for all of those things. And there isn't anyone else who's kind of in the trenches with you, who's, helping you make those decisions or considering those other things that maybe you haven't considered and making you think in a different way. And that you can't force a co-founder relationship, obviously, but that is, I would be really excited to have someone else kind of along with me doing this who's also excited, has similar, underlying values, that would be awesome. How did you and your co-founder link up? How did that work? And, was it a happy marriage the whole time, or did you guys have strife? I imagine you did. How can you not? But how was that experience for you?
Um, wow, we were really good friends since we met at 19,
Okay.
became really, really good friends. At 22, we moved in together. Like, so we were living together. And throughout the entire journey, she was very much into the entrepreneurial space, more of something along the lines of the way you were, that you were like, I'm not sure, like in the university, like leading innovation things, like all sorts of that stuff.
Yeah.
And just being also in the IDF in Israel. So she was in the innovation teams and talking to a lot of stuff. She was like really into that scene. And
Super cool.
I, mm?
Super cool.
Oh, yeah.
But she
And
must have met so many cool people and like been
yes,
involved in so many cool things.
that's the way I saw her. Like when I met her, I was completely like, wow, bedazzled. And we became really good friends. And I was really far from that world of like techie startups, but I was always someone who built projects and had ideas and like stuff like that. And that connection really, really worked well. And at some point, my startup was subletting, like finding sublets within the people you know and their
Hmm.
friends. And at some point, I was looking to sublet somewhere, and she was offering her house. And we were both, before we realized I should just sublet in her house, um, we were both really struggling. Like, how do I find someone that I can trust? How do I find someone he's gonna like, how does it work? And we're
Hmm.
like, huh, we should make an app for that. And it was like a joke for a long time.
Yeah.
And at some point it was like getting more and more serious when we moved in together. We were like, do we actually want to do this? And it was like, possibly, possibly. And I studied UX UI sort of in general, so I know it, but also in my head it was like, I'm gonna need this when we build our app.
That's so
Um,
cool.
yeah, so then I was talking to a friend. He was like, why don't you just start a WhatsApp group and see if anybody's even like how it works? And we started a WhatsApp group and we grew to like over, I don't know, 1,500 people before we even had an app. And we're like, yay.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so it was really exciting. And it was very hard also at times because we're different people. We have different experiences and different ways to react to situations. And she was very outgoing, very good with getting meetings, talking to people, all of that. And I was very good at understanding like the product and what we need and talking to users and how do we really create something people want.
Hmm.
And in a way, we both really liked doing what the other one didn't really like doing, so it felt very, yeah, exact. But for a long time we were missing the like tech founder to join us,
Hmm.
which we had for a while and then we didn't. And like it was also complicated. And also just within ourselves, like the way we navigated it, we moved to New York for the startup. So that was also, a lot of emotions come up. You move out of the comfortable place you were in and you go to a new city, especially one like New York. A lot of feelings bubble up.
Yeah. Oh my
And
God. That's like so
yeah.
many big stressful life things happening at the same time. Like, and they're related, but oh my God, wow. That's a
How
lot.
did you end up in Portugal?
Um, I came, I came theoretically to do a post graduation course in smart cities, and I was like, I'll be here for a year, with the hope that I would, would love it and want to stay forever. And then that post graduation turned into a master's because I studied the application of smart cities and the opportunities and blah blah blah. But I realized that if I wanted to to actually, be productive in that space, I would have to understand spatial data. And so I did my master's in geographic information systems. And almost every project that I did, in that master's was like kind of related to this concept, okay, mapping news, what does that look like? How, whatever. And the original proof of concepts were super ugly. My most recent proof of concept was also super ugly. I've decided, or I've, discovered that I am not a designer. I am not someone who makes things beautiful. But that's okay. But yeah. And then, it turned into forever. I just applied for my citizenship. And so I'm really excited to be here. Um, yeah. But I mean, moving to a new place and kind of figuring out a new culture and figuring out, kind of how things work in that new space is really challenging. I mean, when you're talking about your product, which is about, you mentioned it's about trust and confidence and knowing people and kind of creating a community of, okay, friends of friends. If you're doing that in a new space, you have to understand the culture there. You have to understand, who the people are, who are kind of the centers of a community. You have to know how to get in touch with them. You have to know how to speak their language and make them comfortable and, community. That's so challenging. Like doing that in a culture that is not your native culture is really tough. Like, and especially because you guys are doing something that's so personal. Like, how did you guys handle that transition? More or less from scratch because you had the idea, you were coming in with that idea, and then you had to build a community in a place where you didn't have community.
It
Whoa.
was definitely challenging, and I want to thank my co-founder Galia again for being amazing at that. Basically, I think it was also one of the things we struggled with, but it was also, well, so basically, the way it looked like in New York, it would be Galia was out all day long, either talking to people literally in the street, getting them to like join the app and get friends on it. And just, I remember there was some, I don't know, bagel donut shop. Some shop was having something, like some event. And she just went there and started talking to people in the line of just like, about us. And I remember I heard, I was like, you're amazing, this is, I would not, i I don't think I would be able to do that. And at the same time, while she was out and around people, I would be working in my flat for like 14 hours straight every day, grinding, once in a while going to some social event because I was like, I really do need to meet people if I'm moving here. So it was,
Right.
we had a very different experience of the city.
Oh
And
yeah.
so it was really interesting to like, how do we even look at things in the same way when we're experiencing such different experiences? Like, I'm dealing with bugs and broken things in our website and figuring out lawyery stuff and all of these. And she's like, talking to both young people literally everywhere and investors, going to meetups, meeting like really important people. And I was always, it was always like she would meet some investor, big entrepreneur, anything of the sort, and she would bedazzle them, and then she was like, we're meeting them next week, and I was like, yay.
Wow. Oh, honestly, it sounds like, well, one, I hope you actually did get to enjoy New York a little bit and you were just, 14
At
hours a
the
day
end.
in a basement, whatever. But holy, I mean, it definitely sounds like in terms of, a co-founder pair where you guys have, skills that, are super compatible and kind of, you lift each together. You guys are so much more uh, than kind of yourselves apart. That's amazing to find that in someone else who has like, again, the same underlying motivation, that same, belief. I mean, it sounds like you guys were so invested and just leveraging your own skills in different ways to kind of make everything come together. That's incredible. That's
Thank
incredible.
you. Thank you so much. I think to myself a lot about like the differences of being a solo founder and working with a co-founder. About, you definitely have a lot of the, it's a bit like the difference between talking to a friend and writing in a journal. like you have this person to bounce ideas off of more easily, but
Yeah.
also you have to navigate that.
Hmm.
And when you're on your own, I'm like, tell me your experience. I'm assuming that it would be more, you really have to pay attention to yourself in a way. Like you have to understand what you're feeling, how you're seeing things, and especially if you have a team. How was it like for you?
First of all, I think that's so beautiful the way that you put that, talking to a friend versus in a journal. And that definitely feels, pretty spot on. I think, when you're talking to a friend and you're constantly kind of crystallizing an idea, um, and you're putting your ideas in a way that someone else has to understand, it helps you like in the moment as you're going through crystallize those ideas. Whereas if you're by yourself, you're doing all this work, but at the end of the day, sometimes, you have all these ideas, and then when you have to write them down, you have to put them in words regularly just to make sure that, all of these things do kind of come together. And what's, the journaling analogy and the being by yourself thing is like you have all the control, which is cool, but at the same time, you're not getting challenged. You're not getting other input. We know in general, like in people in jobs to be done in entrepreneurship and innovation, that range is really important, and having people with different backgrounds and different perspectives can really only make something stronger. And so I think I would sacrifice control to have kind of that input, from others to make something stronger, to have, kind of, yeah, that support and also that challenge as you go. I think that is pretty great.
Cool.
Though then again, always getting your way is kind of nice too. But I guess it depends on the day. But I really like that analogy. I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you. Do you think, um, how do I word this? What's a challenge you had to face as a founder that you feel like you're glad you went through and you wouldn't have if you weren't doing this?
That's a great question. Definitely pitching and public speaking is one, and that is, an area that I have a lot to improve in for sure. But like I said, just knowing that it has happened gives me the confidence to move forward to try it again. Also, I'm much more comfortable these days going up to people and talking to them and kind of not kind of projecting my idea onto them, but just really trying to understand what makes them tick. And I think there's so many entrepreneurial and innovative skills that aren't just great in this industry, and in entrepreneurship, but they kind of translate really well into other areas of life. And I think this interest in kind of why people do things and kind of willingness to kind of dig deep and understand, what is the why for this, what is the why for that, and going deeper and deeper, um, is definitely like a skill that I've been developing as a result of being kind of in this position that probably I would not have been um, developing otherwise. And it's been really, really cool to get more. First of all, just get more comfortable talking to people about my idea or about their motivations and how they do things. Um, yeah, I think just comfort with starting a conversation, getting deep, getting weird, has definitely also been a result of this process that otherwise um, I may not have developed. But I don't know. There have been so many challenges. All of
Yeah.
them? Like, I don't know. All of the challenges that I've gone through recently. Yeah. Yeah. Those are the examples that come to mind. If I think of a cooler one, I'll let you know.
Cool. Okay, what's the funniest, weirdest, craziest thing you've done to get a client, a team member to join, a like something? What is something weird that happened along the way?
Ooh. Oh no. This is such a great question, and I really wish I had something like teed up and ready to go. A weird, funny experience as a result of this to try to get someone on board.
You can think for a second. I can cut this part out of like a minute of thinking.
Perfect. I feel like there needs to be like some sort of like watch, clicking or something. Huh. This is totally the kind of thing that, like, in the shower later, I'll be like, ah, it was this, of
Should have
course.
told him about this person.
Oh, of course. Yeah, honestly, right now, I don't even have like a nugget of inspiration to talk about. And I really wish I did because that's such a great question. Yeah, I don't know. If I think
You'll
of it
remember
like
later, maybe.
throughout, yeah, we'll do like an annex, like an addendum later, and I'll be like, Callie thought of this thing. Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Did you
Wait,
ever?
wait. Do you have one? What's yours?
We had a lot of weird situations. um,
I want to know.
I think best one was when my co-founder, like, I heard about it in retrospect. I wasn't there, but it's like a mind blown situation. She calls me and it's like midnight or something, and she's like whispering, and I'm like, "What's up?" And she's like, "I met these bunch of investors, and there's this guy who's a billionaire, and I mean, da, da, da." And she's like talking quietly, and I'm like, "Oh my god, that's so cool!" Blah blah blah. She's like, "Yeah, I have to go. We're going somewhere now." I was like, "Okay." And then she calls me the next day, and she's like, "You wouldn't believe it." And I'm like, "What?" And she tells me basically she went to a music she took them to a music show, but it had already finished when they got there. So basically, I don't even remember what they did, but she was up with a bunch of investors until like 4 a.m., just like just somewhere around New York, going around places. And I was like, how do you even get in these situations? Like, I don't even understand how that's a thing. I
Wow,
she
girl is always on the clock.
she
Always schmoozing.
Yes.
Oh
Wow.
my God.
Yeah. Another funny story is just the fact that we had a launch party and the app was not ready by the party. So we did a like all nighter. We had the CTO at the time, and while people were arriving to the party, I have this picture. Like, I knew it's a moment I'll never forget. So I took a picture. People are literally arriving to our apartment, and he's sitting in the living room with like three big screens, and he's like hysterically coding. And I'm like, this is gonna be like, I'm gonna remember this story forever.
That feels so startup-y. Like that just feels like, oh
That's
my
what we
God.
felt. We were like, is this the coolest thing ever? And
So wait, was it ready like during the party? Did you guys launch it?
we did launch something, but it was like, it wasn't the app we ended up using.
Okay.
So we didn't really get anything from those users, but it was cool, and it was cool having people like we we had it as we were leaving our apartment before moving to New York. So it was like a both a saying goodbye and a launch, and it was cool. It was
I
cool.
mean, I feel like that's awesome. Who cares if it wasn't the actual app that you guys ended up using? You did it. You probably got like at least some feedback. You also executed something, which sometimes just feels really good to like have done something, which is amazing. And also, someone, I think this is a nugget, of wisdom that people say a lot, but, someone just repeated it to me recently. If you're not embarrassed if you're MVP, like, then you waited too long to launch it. So that's awesome. That's awesome that you did it and that people were there witnessing the experience. But that's so cool. And like, what a cool bonding moment also for your team. That sounds incredible.
Yeah, definitely.
That's great.
It was so fun. It was like probably the most fun we've had. Like the crisis vibe of that situation was like, we our CTO did not sleep for like 2 days. Like, we were so proud of him because he was like so on it those 2 days, and it was, yeah, it
That
was
must have
what it was.
felt, whatever you guys launched at that party must have felt so good. It must have been your baby. And you're like, we worked for every like piece of this. Like, this is earned. That must have been such a great feeling and so much fun to celebrate after.
Yeah, yeah. It's so funny. I feel like you're interviewing me.
Well, so we also haven't had a chance to like really get it. First of all, this is like the first time that we've had a conversation,
Yeah.
right? Outside of Rocket Booster. And also like it's so cool to hear about what's going on with you. And I don't know, like, I actually, there are a lot of questions I haven't asked. How many podcasts have you done so far in this series? Have you interviewed, like, has someone interviewed you? Like, how is, because I'm learning so much from you in the conversation, like now and also before.
Um, no, I haven't been interviewed. Um,
Someone should. See, I'm doing a public service.
thank you. I feel like this is really like what I was after. I feel like the like when you tell a story about the struggles and then I say something and we both can connect over that thing of like such a shared struggle and the excitement of understanding the stakes when you say you're gonna launch an app and then something like that. And yeah, exactly. Like understanding it is something that I don't see enough online. I see the big podcasts talking about how someone did a $200 million exit, and I'm like, I just don't feel good enough now. And it's like such
Yeah.
a thing. And I really wrote down, like, I have a list of questions of things that I know that I did not understand when I was starting out. And I wish someone would have been more honest with me,
Hmm.
because it's not even like I asked and then someone gave me a false answer, but it's just one of those things that no one asks because it's not something you ask. And then you kind of just you go with the vibe. Everyone seems to be doing well, so if I'm not doing well, I must be the one with the problem. And
Yeah.
can I even call myself a founder? Can I even like what is this? And
Yeah. The
so yeah,
definitions of these things I think is really interesting. Like, at what point are you a founder? At what point, is this a project? Is this a, where do these definitions come? And you don't want to ask those questions because then you're like, I'm an imposter. Those are some really important questions that are worthwhile to ask. And they also have moving definitions all the time. And also, you mentioned something about, okay, you didn't, it's not like you asked a question and someone didn't give you the right answer, but like you just don't even know what to ask at the beginning. Like you don't even know what the questions that you should be asking are or like that are relevant. Yeah. And then when
yeah,
someone else talks about it, then you're like, ah, that is a good thing. I
exactly,
should think
exactly.
about that.
I ask people often when they like when I'm interviewing, I ask them, when did you first start calling yourself a founder? And since I've been interviewing mostly people who are either relatively beginning their first startup or even quite like already after funding, already like doing pretty well in their startup, but still usually quite early.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone has an answer of like, well, not everyone. Some people feel very natural in that space, which is also
Mm-hmm.
interesting. But a lot of
Yeah.
people are like, well, I don't know if I called myself a founder back then, and I don't know when exactly. Like, people, more than I expected, it's a commonality within most people that they're like, founder. Like, I'm not really sure, but yeah, I mean, I guess I am. I remember when we had, I think, over 1,000 people in our WhatsApp community, and I was like, can I call myself a founder? It's just a WhatsApp community. I don't know. And then okay, so I release a website, but there are barely any users. Am I a founder now because I have a website, but
Yeah.
like not many people use it. So and just all these questions
Question. Did you Google it?
of course.
Me
And
too.
what you just get conflicting answers. You have
You
no idea.
do. But I did see, I was, and I'm not like going into like deep whatever Google, like this is like the rigorous whatever. I was going for like the first answers that came up. And like one of them was like, if you have a project, it doesn't even need to be a business. If you have a project, you're the founder of that project. And I was like, I definitely have a project. That is for sure. I think that was probably about the time that I started calling, like, not calling myself a founder, but like being more comfortable with that term. And when I was filling out applications or whatever online for things, when it was like, what is your title? I felt more comfortable putting founder once I disassociated the word founder from startup and I associated it with projects. That was the moment that it felt okay to me. I think probably a lot of us are doing a lot of Google searches that we'd be very embarrassed if anyone saw our Google history. Just trying to figure out like what this world is because that's, yeah, I, it makes a lot of sense to me that a lot of people would be like, oh, founder, weird. But yeah, okay, I'm
Yeah.
glad I'm not the only one who Googles.
No. What do you think is something that you realize now, but you did not realize before you started?
Mm. The amount of people who before I even started or like was, pondering whatever, who were just like talk to people, get things into their hand, whatever, product market fit, blah blah blah. I'm still not super comfortable obviously with all of these things because it takes practice to get comfortable with all of that. They were telling me the truth, but it still has taken me a long time to get there. The fact that you do need to go out and talk to people, and the fact that the more you do it now, the easier it will become later, and the better you will get at interviewing to get the information and nuggets and insights that you need. Starting that right away is so important because the sooner you start, the sooner you get better at it, and the sooner you get the information you need. And even if, most of us, I think, are scared to go out and actually be vulnerable and ask the questions that could ruin our startup or ruin our idea, um, because it's our baby and we don't want it to be ruined and we want it, to carry it through and nurture it and give it the power it needs to, be ready and to be able to overcome all the bad feedback and whatever. But I think, probably most people who go through this process have to basically learn that on their own somehow, even though everyone is telling them that you need to talk to people and you need to be vulnerable and you need to put yourself in a place where someone could kill your baby, like could tear your idea down. And then when you do get that feedback, you you take it and you mark it as an insight and you put it in your database of insights, and then you decide, okay, does this kill my startup? Does it, do I pivot? Do I make it stronger? How do I take this new piece of information that, of course, just like we were talking about earlier, you're getting a lot of conflicting information, and some people can give you really great feedback about the thing that you're doing, and someone else can, tell you it's absolute crap, whatever. But you take all of that information and you have to be willing to get that information, and then you have to take that information and you need to look at all of the information that you've collected and then make decisions based on all of those things. Um, but I'm not good at being vulnerable with my idea. And it's something that I'm actively trying to get better at. And that I think has been one of the biggest learning experiences. And it's funny because people from the beginning have been telling me this was not a secret, but it is something that you have to, I think, go through and practice, um, to have the conversations, to put yourself out there, to make things happen. Yeah.
Amazing. And how do you see yourself? Like, what's the difference from you of before? Like, how did you evolve within that context?
It's definitely still a process. I'm still figuring out, okay, how can I kind of take and remove my ego and whatever and kind of dig through and get good information. Um, I'm much better at telling other people that that's a thing than I used to be. So that's an evolution I get. Um, yeah, how I'm much more comfortable having conversations. I am getting better at being more vulnerable, and just kind of diving in. It's not perfect. Sometimes I catch myself um, not being vulnerable and kind of angling for the praise. Um, but I guess, yeah, the the amount of times that I am vulnerable and put myself out there and am willing to hear bad news is a lot. The percentage is a lot higher than it used to be. And I think maybe also like in an actual physical aspect, I think when I get bad news now, the way it registers on my face is different. I would
That's
guess as well.
that's cool. Very useful as a founder.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And looking at it as learning and not, bad news, but an opportunity to ingest and learn and, decide to do with that information what you will. I guess that's the biggest change. The same for you? Did you have a different experience? Like what did pre-entrepreneurial Addie look like versus now Addie?
Absolutely different.
Yeah?
Absolutely. There's no chance in hell I would have done this podcast before. No way.
Nice.
Um, I think I think one of the major things I learned, and my the first serious thing that I did was I had this project, volunteer project where I got how do I put this in a concise way? So I had a volunteer project where I got high schoolers to tutor middle schoolers that needed
Oh, cool.
tutors. Yeah, when I was like 20, something like that. It was just I wanted to volunteer somewhere and I didn't find anywhere that matched my time that I had. So I was like, who has a ton of time? High schoolers. Hey, maybe I just start something that lets them volunteer because I don't have time to volunteer. And I can invent a program at nighttime when I can't teach. So cool. It was,
Awesome.
yeah, it was random. Uh, but it was so scary for me. I was like, I remember I emailed the woman who's in charge of volunteer projects in the city that I lived. And I emailed her and I was like, hey, I have this idea. I want to da da da. And I got no reply. And I think for like months, many months, I was like, well, she didn't reply. So I guess that's it. And then at some point I was like, okay, I have to call. So I did. And her assistant or someone answers and I was like basically pitching the assistant to let me talk to the it's like where I live in a city called Hodeshawan. It's quite it's it's not a small city, but it's like it's not big. But
Okay.
this woman who was in charge of she was in charge of all things community in the city. She's quite well known in the city.
Okay.
And I wanted to talk to her because someone told me that she's the person who can help me get high schoolers and teachers on board. And I was like, okay, I have to. So I'm talking to her sister or someone like that. And she's like, I don't know if this is really relevant. And I went into survival mode. I was like, no, I have to because I was like, I was like adamant that she lets me speak to um, that person. Her name was Asnat, and she was like, "Well, oh, okay, well, I'm moving you to Asnat." And I was like, "Thank you." And I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, "Whoa!" And then we started working together. She was super into it. She liked that basically I wasn't asking her for anything other than for her to connect me to like the schools,
Okay.
and she was like, "For sure." Um, which showed me that like what was I so afraid of when I sent her the email? Like what would have happened? Nothing.
Yeah.
If I just
What's the worst
called
case scenario here?
and and then um and every step along the way I was so scared. Like when I was reaching out to a new school, when I was talking to parents or like people in charge of at some point she got me in touch with someone who was like in charge of the school district, sort of like all these people who I felt were so much smarter and bigger than me, and like they know what they're doing, and I'm so like such a beginner and blah blah. Blah. And every step I made was terrifying. But then I was like, if I had to do that again, that would take me like 1% the mental energy that it took me, and it would take me like half the time. So I was like, huh, okay, so this isn't so hard. And then I think over time, especially with a startup, you start up out thinking everybody's such a big shot and everyone is so important and there's no way you can like how can you even talk to them? And then you realize that people like people. And if you can be
Hmm.
a person people like talking to, then you can get into a lot of rooms that you're not actually supposed to be in. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I feel.
Like overcoming imposter syndrome and just realizing, okay, humans are humans. And, if I talk to this person like a human, they're likely to talk to me as a human as well. But there's so many things I just took from that story. One, you've been an entrepreneur for a long time. Is like from the beginning of the story. Like that definitely comes through. Like you are a person who has ideas and then makes them happen, and that is very cool.
Thank
Um,
you. That was like
yeah,
the first actual, thing that I feel proud of. Like I take it with me. Yeah.
that's amazing. And like, I don't think I would have had the confidence to do that at 20. And I don't think I would have had the idea to do that. And I love that you were like, I don't like any of these volunteering options. I'll make my own. Awesome. That's so cool.
Thank
But
you.
yeah, and kind of, just, dedicated questions to a person. Like, I don't even need money. I don't need, well, I need you, but I don't need, a big ask from you. You're a person who has control over these various things. Can you help me with this specific thing? I feel like that works a lot of the time because people like, the recognition or whatever. And then if you can give them one small thing that you need that's actionable and easy for them to do, awesome. And yeah, how's your relationship now with her? Are you guys still in touch?
With the woman from the
Yeah.
not really. I mean, she's much older than me. She's I don't want to get that wrong, but I think she's close to being in her 60s,
Okay.
maybe a bit younger.
Okay.
Um and she's oh wow, there's a siren. So I told her I don't want to be running it for another year because I was just finishing my army service. I did like a few years in the army and I
Mm-hmm.
was doing it at the same time. And I knew that I might be traveling and I might be starting. I didn't know what was going on with me that year. So I told her I can't, but I'd be very glad if someone from like the city officially took this project and implemented it.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, sure. So I talked to those people, and I'm not sure if it's still running, but at the time it was running. Like we matched different schools, and then there was like a dedicated person in each school who was in charge of the matches. And
That's so
and
cool.
I exited. uh,
Amazing.
yeah,
I
so
imagine a
now,
volunteering exit is a lot, simpler and
yes.
less legal and blah 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 than a
Yeah, I always tell people, like when I talk to young people about getting started, that I feel like creating something that's like a volunteer project is such a good first step because the anxieties are the same anxieties, but you're not asking for money from anyone.
hmm
And when money is involved, things get a bit more complicated, I would say. But the feelings of I need to talk to someone and I need to do this and how do I word this and how do I do this, da, 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 it's the same if you're trying to make money and if you're not. And if you're young and you're like high school, college, and you can afford to just like spend some time in something that's not going to make money,
hmm
you're going to build this the basic abilities of. I don't think I would have been able to even start the startup without doing that because after that I felt like okay, like I did something and now I can take even a bigger step. But I going from nothing to now I have a startup might have been a stretch for me personally. Some people works great, but
Yeah. No, but I can see how like you said, you're practicing all of these skills. You kind of, you're still creating a value proposition for people. It's just a different thing. Instead of them giving you, money, they're giving you time and effort and skills or whatever resources. So like, yeah, it seems like you would still have all of those same basic skills that you need to build, but in kind of a lower pressure environment. That seems so valuable. And, then when you took this to your next project, you had, you had all of that experience to draw on that you could then directly apply. So instead of, the 100% brain power, whatever it was taking in the time, like you mentioned, like now it's so much faster and more direct. That's incredible. That's great advice. I wish I had taken that advice. Maybe I should take that advice now. I don't know. Um, that's super, super cool. But that actually, while you were talking, it made me think about something else. And I'm curious to know how you handle this. One area that so whenever, if you're doing this, you're making connections, you're kind of bridging new areas, you're creating new relationships. how have you handled maintaining relationships? So if someone, helps you in one way, or they, give you an interview, or, whatever you're doing, how are you maintaining relationships in the long term? I feel like that's an area that I am weak in. And so I'm genuinely curious to learn from you about how you handle that.
I can. I feel almost called out. I feel.
Oh, no. Sorry.
No, no. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you. I once heard. I studied NLP for a year. Do you know, like NLP, the psychology, like neuro linguistic programming, not
Ah,
NLP computers, NLP psychology.
I'm really glad you clarified because I definitely was going towards the other.
Yeah, I thought so. People always do.
Right.
Um, so I learned a lot about it's it's a lot about communication. That's like
Hmm.
the main thing. It's about both communication with the world, but also communication with yourself and the way you see things. And it's like I always recommend it to everyone. I think it's one of the best investments I ever made in my mental health and my understanding of the world and everything. So
Okay, noted.
so one of the definitely like if you ever get a chance, wow. So my the the teacher of my class, he also happened to be, well, I don't know if I would say happened to be, but he was the CEO of the school that I was studying in. And the only reason I signed up is because his cousin was like, my cousin is doing this course. He never teaches them. He's the CEO. You should go. You should go. I was like, this sounds okay. Yes. Like interested.
Opportunity. I'll take it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love talking to people who are doing stuff. So it's like, I was like, sure. And to learn something like that from them, cool. And I remember it was something that he kind of threw like as a side note to something he was saying, but I was like, whoa, this is something that I'm going to take for life. He was talking about how memories are formed when something happens, and the reason you remember it is because you've thought about it since. It's not like you have a memory of something and you remember that first time, but you're sort of remembering the, like, if, okay, so this interview, for example,
Hmm.
if I, which I probably will, by the way, if I text you later today and I'm like, wow, thank you. And then in 2 days, I'll be like, I just thought about this thing that is super relevant.
Okay.
And then in a week, I'll will some I'll post something on LinkedIn and you'll respond. And then in a month, I'll post this video
Hmm.
and you'll watch or you'll listen and you'll think about it. And then in 3 months, somehow you'll see me on LinkedIn on something.
Right.
And like I've created this situation where in growing, like, I forgot how to say it in English. Well, like each time the distance from the previous encounter gets bigger, but
Okay.
because in the beginning it was built well, you remember me. So if I talk to you 2 years later, there's a bunch of different points that you remember.
Okay.
and he was talking about that with his about he has a son, and he was like, I know I want my son to have happy childhood memories that are cool. So he said that the other day we were building this Lego something, and we built it really 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 high, and I was like, I want him to remember. So that evening we talked about it, and then the next day I was like, how cool was yesterday? And 2 days later, he showed him a photo of, remember when we did that? And then like over time, like that's a memory that kid will have. And yeah, I felt like that too. Yeah. And I really like that. Like when I talk to people, I try to reach out shortly after and then a bit longer after. And
Okay.
then there's a bit of a relationship built beyond, because if you talk to someone once, then it's nice, but it's like, okay, you talk to them once. Um, but even if you have short encounters later, that person is remembering, and you're like triggering this domino effect in a way. I believe in I believe in that. Yeah.
I Well, I will think of, like, this is blowing my brain. I will think about this a lot, so probably this will be like now a core memory because I'm going to think about it a lot, and like have all these touch points to come back to. It make like this is one of those things that like it makes so much sense. Never have I thought about it that way.
Same. Until someone told, like, until he said it, I was like, huh.
Huh. I am definitely going to have to look at the, like, I have right now in my email inbox, which is, like a to do list, more or less. I have people who I know I need to respond to. The time has passed when it was appropriate to do the response. Um, but I really do want to respond to them, but like there's just all these other things coming on, or there's some things that I wanted to do before I responded to them. Like I wanted to give them a good follow up, whatever. I think this conversation will probably change how I address those things, and like the timeline that I try to set and how I approach those conversations to, yeah, I mean, to influence probably the relationship that will happen. And I think, we all know that these touch points that create do influence the relationship, but I've never thought about it and, how we make memories and how we can like reinforce the memories that we want other people to have or share or whatever. That's
Also, by the way,
amazing.
something I do just because I am reaching out to a lot of people now, both on like within the project that I'm working on, like at work,
Mm-hmm.
and within the podcast to get more and more people.
Yeah.
And responding to people is is an issue. Like it kind of has to be in mind. For me, I really work well with structure. Like I know that every Sunday noon, I go over my LinkedIn and everyone that like whatever is there, I respond to and I start any new conversation I have to have. And
Okay.
then I'm like, okay, I've done the stressful thing
Mm-hmm.
and now it'll be easier because I'm like
Okay.
connecting to people, signing stuff, and it's I feel like well, what do you think? I feel like there's a lot of different people in terms of some people portion sizes work for them. I feel like for me, it's more of an all or nothing approach. Like so I'm vegan, and
Mm-hmm.
I had a partner who he wasn't vegan. He was 99% vegan, and I would be I wouldn't understand how that even works because I see that he is sort of in, but he's not so adamant about it, which was has a certain magic to it because then you're not the vegan who can't eat anything when whatever.
Yeah.
And in a way, like what he was saying is I get to influence much more people when they see how I eat, but they don't put me in this stigma of, oh, he's the vegan. And I feel like it's the same with communication. Like it's hard for me to be like, I'm just going to be available answering throughout the day. But if I have an hour of, okay, this is what I'm doing
Mm-hmm.
100% in this hour, and the rest of the day, I don't have to respond to anyone, that works for me better. How do you feel?
I would not say, like I said, I have this ongoing problem. I would not say that I have found my way of doing it. I like the idea. I'd say in general, I'm more of kind of okay, maybe I just get in the mode. Like if you're communicating with people and you're, in the mode of communication, I feel like it's a lot easier to stay in the mode of communication. Like you've got the flow, you're working on it, you're talking to this person, and maybe this person is in a completely different context, but like you're in communication mode. I feel like for me it's probably easier to probably batch that kind of thing. Weekly makes a lot of sense too, because a week is probably not too long for most people, especially if we're talking about casual conversations. But yeah, uh, the drips, I'd say, is how I am handling it, and I don't think it's working super well. But I really like this idea of kind of just giving yourself, okay, this is the moment. I'm going to do it this way. This is my time, and then and handling it like that. That makes a lot of sense. I like it. I like it. I'm going to try it.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things that I'm taking out of this conversation.
Me too, by the way. I think it's really
Nice.
interesting. I think being a solo founder is like, it's like the amount of confidence and drive and just belief that it takes is, and I'm sure like you're being very humble throughout this whole like talk about yourself, but it's something that not many people take on themselves.
So, two different directions I want to go with that simultaneously. One question that I'm gonna like start right now, and then I want to come back to it is: you're a solo founder right now with your podcast. Like, we need to get into that for sure.
If we're
Yes.
being totally honest, this is more like the volunteer project than the anything else, because the way I approach people is the same way I approached then, which is I think young founders should have something to listen to that isn't like, we made $100 million, yay.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's amazing, but it's like at different moods. Like sometimes you just need to hear something funny, something light, something that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then I say, do you want to join me on this thing?
So many critical people who have helped me to get to this point, like, and both kind of, in a really, it's not like I want to say in a really loose way, but it's not like there's so many people who have been supporting me throughout this who, are there for my emotional support. Like, my partner is a founder of a business, he has co-founders or whatever, it's a different business, but the amount that I learned from him is incredible, and the amount of times that he's listened to me pitch, in our home all the time is a lot, and the amount of support when I feel, whatever, I get so much support from him. The people, the reason I have a client like this client now who's doing this testing, I met, the founder of that project years ago. She and her team have been, basically, back when this was still just an idea and not transitioning towards a business, she gave me so much support from the beginning. And over the years, has given me so much support. And now there's someone else on her team, several people from her team, who are kind of with me in the trenches all the time, giving me so much support, like testing, giving me feedback, taking a chance on me, which is incredible. Like, we're talking about planning a party sometime soon. And the amount of resources and support that they're sharing with me is incredible, which is amazing. The reason I know this person is because the lab that I used to work in, which was a smart cities focused lab, I mean, the people there, I learned so much from the other people there all the time, but like they were the ones who also made the introduction to this woman who was starting this new project from the beginning. Um, the mentors that I have, the programs that I've been a part of, like, no part of this has been going it alone. The only part that's alone is, okay, I'm the one responsible for the decisions, but like no part of this has been me on my own. The support that I've had from academia, from like my personal life and my friends and family, and then also from like collaborators and partners, like no part of that has been alone. I have leaned so heavily on so many people who have just been unbelievable, unbelievably kind and generous with their time, their experience, providing me things. The people who I thought were maybe going to be co-founders who didn't end up being co-founders, like they still contributed so much to the project. I can't even begin to start, thanking all the people who have been involved. But I guess I really want to make it clear that, okay, yes, I'm the one who's driving this train, but like there's so many people who, if even just one of them wasn't involved, I wouldn't be here doing this thing. The project would not be where it is. Um, and so I guess, yeah, having a good network, having people that you believe in, who you can also try to provide value to, and all of those things is so important. Um, but yeah, just I guess I just wanted to make that distinction that, yeah, it's solo founder is one thing, but then like all of these other people who make these things possible is so important, and they're so real, and they're, they're not just like, I'm not just trying to pay lip service. Like, they are so important to the whole process. And I imagine that, even if you have a co-founder, you found the same thing. Like, all of these people around you in the community and, the partners that you're generating, like they're also so, so important. Would be my guess. Do you have any good stories about partners or the other people who have kind of supported you throughout all of this?
I think that same as you, we've had such amazing people like join for different parts of the journey. Some some were tough because it was people we thought would be like would join us for good and then didn't end up, and some were advisors that like gave us different directions and we had to make decisions, and then according to these decisions it's like it kind of shows you who you need to talk to, and kind of I think I learned a lot about, I think the tech industry is really cool in the fact that successful people, and this is, I don't know why the tech industry, because what I'm going to say is, well, I'll say what I think and then we can think about it. But I feel like in tech, people who are successful, when they're successful, they're usually really successful and they don't really have to work that hard to like make a living. They've kind of made their money and they're so excited to help other people. And I haven't seen, granted, I haven't been too far into any other industry, but from what I've heard from people, it's not usually like that in, not in regular business, not in any other field. Usually the advice serious founders, entrepreneurs just want to give away for free and talk to people and help them is insane. And I think it's because it's so hard in the beginning that you're like, if I see, and I can say that about myself now, if I see an 18-year-old who has a dream and I see them taking actual steps towards it, I think you also get some sort of like a radar for, is this person actually serious or not? Because if someone's like, yeah, I have this idea, blah blah, so like, yeah, cool, nice, I mean, great. But when you see someone who's driven and going, and obviously I didn't get that far in my startup, so it's not like I'm coming from some, you know, very far place. But when I see people who are like real beginners, and I see they're really working at it and they're serious, I love helping them. I'm like, of course, I know this person. Can they help you? I know this person. Like, I really want to. And yeah, I feel like everyone has that. And also, some people won't want to help, and some people won't respond, and that's totally okay because these people exist, and like, kind of, who cares? Like,
Yeah. I, I would totally like that experience feels so like I feel like I've experienced a lot of that. The people who are just like so excited to help and share and connect. Like the amount of connections that people will just like hand you on a silver platter is sometimes shocking. Like how collaborative people are and how sometimes people are like in competing, like they're in the same industry, they're in competing companies, but they'll still connect you with, it's amazing. And if someone is receptive and willing to take that on, oh my God, like the amount of resources that you can find, I think, and I'm sure it depends like country by country or ecosystem by ecosystem and industry by industry. Um, but I would say like the experience that I've had both in Denver, Colorado, where I was before, and also now in Lisbon, Portugal, and then also internationally because we have all of these very cool like international incubators and whatever that's happening. It definitely feels like that's true. Like people are so willing to share time, resources, all of these things with people who they feel may benefit from it, which is incredible. I think just if people show that they will take a step, like, yeah, like they will create a WhatsApp group, like they will talk to people, they will, they won't just say, what a cool idea. Wouldn't it be cool if, but like they actually do something about it. Even a small step, I think, shows people that you're willing to do something. You're a doer. And it's really cool to see. And yeah, to those people who don't have the time or whatever, they have different priorities. They've, maybe created their own boundaries to keep their life work balance or whatever and protect their own mental health. Like that's a great thing for them too. So it's totally fine. And there are all of these other people who are willing to help and connect you. And that's, yeah.
I'm gonna ask you one final question. We're already above time limits. Okay, last question.
Cool.
What would you tell yourself of the beginning of the journey?
Ugh, do be more of a doer. It took me a long time to be a doer. Like I spent a lot of time planning and preparing and whatever. And I would definitely try to take the advice that other people gave me sooner, which is do, okay, you have this idea, test it. Like, what do people actually say? What are you learning? And of course, a lot of that is, okay, you can then take this and you can put it in a report, you can put it in a pitch or whatever, and you can show other people and it's validation for your idea and product market fit, whatever. But talk to people, test the idea for you, learn from the conversations you're having, build something and get it, into people's hands as soon as possible. Don't wait for things to be perfect. Um, just go. And also know that what people are telling you comes from their own experience and it can be conflicting. And trust your gut. I think if you don't trust your gut, then it'll be really hard to make decisions. And if you're not really in tune with your gut, then understand what your non-negotiables are and your underlying values are, and let those guide you, and let that be your gut.
Thank you so much for joining and both asking me questions that I feel like I don't really answer, and that was really fun. Um, but
Nice.
also sharing your story and being really open about the fact that not everything is like entrepreneurship is not a straight line, and I really appreciate the honesty of saying that, of not being like, yeah, I'm in this place, and you know, like really being open about it. And thank you so much for your time.